There were exactly 12 clocks ticking in the living room when the phone rang. None of them told the correct time. One was even running backward. I let it ring 5 times before answering. On the 6th, I picked up. "Don't hang up," the voice said. "It's about the box." I hadn't heard her voice in 5 years. Not since the night the fire alarm went off and she walked out with a suitcase in one hand and her wedding ring in the other. I never asked where she went. I never wanted to know. Until now. "What box?" I said, even though I already knew which one. There was a pause. I could hear faint shuffling. "Papers, maybe. Or wind." Then she spoke again, lower this time. "The one behind the drywall." My fingers curled involuntarily. No one should have known about that. I sealed it 3 weeks before our divorce. 2 feet behind the guest room closet. I'd covered it with plaster and repainted the wall while she was in Denver visiting her aunt, who turned out to be a divorced chiropractor named Vance. I knew about him. I never told her. That box held things. Dangerous things. Not weapons. Worse. Proof. "You opened it?" I asked. My voice cracked. "No," she said quickly. "But someone else is trying to." A door creaked in the background of her call. She gasped, then whispered, "Wallace, they found the map." The line cut out. I just sat there, staring at the clocks, every single one of them ticking out of sync. Something wasn't right. The box was supposed to be undetectable. The map was never supposed to be real. And Meera, she was never supposed to call again. So why now? And why was she terrified? I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I sat on the floor, surrounded by clocks that ticked and talked like a jury deliberating whether I was guilty of something I'd long forgotten. The power flickered once around 3:17 a.m., but maybe that was just the wind. Or maybe it was the house reacting to her voice after all this time. Meera's voice. I hadn't spoken her name in years. Not out loud, anyway. I'd trained my mind to purge her like a virus. I'd burned photographs, deleted voicemails, trashed old clothes that smelled like her shampoo. I even threw out the couch we bought together after I caught myself checking the cushions for her earrings. But the box. I never destroyed the box. Because I couldn't. Because some part of me knew. If the truth ever mattered again, that box would be the only thing left worth opening. Now someone else had found it. Or found out about it. And I didn't know how. At 6:42 a.m., I checked the hallway camera I had installed after the neighbor's kid keyed my car. Nothing abnormal. Just the usual. A drunk stumbling by at 2 a.m. A delivery truck that stopped but didn't drop anything. And then, a shadow. A figure. Just outside the lens. They never approached the door, never rang the bell. But they stood there. For almost 7 minutes. Not moving. Just watching. Then gone. I made coffee and went through the motions of pretending I had control over the situation. But I knew that voice in the call, the panic in Meera's throat, was real. She was scared. And Meera was never scared. Not even when I told her I knew about Vance. She laughed in my face, said I was paranoid, said I was just another man too weak to keep a woman happy. Then she left, and I found out later she didn't even wait a week before moving in with him. But now she was calling me. I went to the closet where the box had once been hidden. I had sealed it with 2 inches of plaster, then layered paint and wallpaper over it, just to be sure. But as I stood there in the guest room, something was different. The wallpaper had a crease, a small one, barely noticeable, but it hadn't been there before. My breath slowed. I pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing. But then I noticed the postcard. It was slid under the door. A single white postcard, no return address, no stamp. Just a black ink drawing of a screaming mouth. Not a person, just the mouth. Open wide. Inside the mouth were words. "You shouldn't have buried it." My hands shook. I flipped it over. Written in the same black ink. "We want the other half." What other half? The map? The box? Meera? And how the hell did they know about any of it? My phone rang again. Unknown number. This time, I picked up on the first ring. Wallace. Not Meera's voice. A man's. Flat, emotionless. "You're going to help her, whether you want to or not." The line clicked off, and I finally realized. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was something bigger. Something she had dragged me into. Or maybe I had dragged her. Either way, there was no going back. By noon, I'd already driven out to the hardware store and bought a hammer, a chisel, and a crowbar. No more subtlety. If someone had gotten into the wall behind that closet, I needed to know how, and I needed to know what they found. I hadn't been back there since I sealed it. The first few blows of the hammer felt wrong. like I was desecrating something sacred. But after the first layer of paint cracked, the rest came off like skin peeling from a lie. Beneath it, jagged plaster, the faint imprint of a seam I thought I'd erased forever. But when I broke through the wall, I felt my heart drop into my stomach. The box was gone. I stood in silence, dust hanging in the air like a fog of regret. My knees buckled slightly. I leaned against the wall, staring into the empty space behind it. The wood paneling was still there. The insulation looked untouched. But the wooden lockbox, small, unmarked, sealed with brass latches, was nowhere to be found. Only one person besides me ever knew where it was. Meera. I should have known. That call wasn't about warning me. It was about watching me panic. Or maybe it was a trap, meant to see how I'd react. But before I could spiral deeper, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message. No name. No contact info. Just a screenshot. A photo of a storage unit contract. Signed under my name. Dated 3 weeks ago. My blood ran cold. I hadn't rented any unit. I hadn't signed anything. But there it was, unit number 108, Harbortown Lock and Go, signed with my full name, driver's license number, and even a fingerprint. A perfect match. Except I never went there. I hadn't even heard of the place. I looked it up. 20 miles south. Industrial edge of town. The kind of place you don't notice unless you're specifically trying to forget it exists. I drove there. The sky was gray, low, and heavy. Not stormy. Just tense. The front office was closed. Permanently, it seemed, but the keypad still worked. I typed in the unit number. The code from the text, 1987. The gate opened. Unit 108 was near the back. Its metal door rusted around the hinges. It looked like it hadn't been opened in years. But as I approached, I noticed fresh boot prints in the dirt. Large, deliberate, and deep. Not mine. The air smelled like motor oil and mildew. I unlocked it. Inside was nothing but a single table, a metal folding chair, and, at the center, my old wooden lockbox. No dust. No scratches. No sign it had been touched. But someone had moved it here. And worse, someone had added a sticker to the top. A small, circular one with just 3 numbers printed on it. 553. I stood there, pulse thudding in my ears. Then something moved behind me. I turned fast, too fast, and slipped on the loose gravel. No one was there. Just the hallway of silent, identical units stretching in both directions. But I wasn't alone. I knew that now. Someone wanted me to open the box. Someone went to great lengths to make sure I found it again. So I sat down, unlatched it. Inside were 4 things. A disposable flip phone, still powered on. A burned photo of Travis with something scribbled on the back. A red USB stick taped with a label that read, "Don't plug in unless you're alone." And a crumpled letter. My name on the front, written in Meera's handwriting. I reached for the letter, but the phone buzzed. The screen lit up. No number. Just one text. "You opened the wrong wall." And just like that, every hair on my body stood up. What wall? What did they mean? And why? After 5 years of silence, was I suddenly at the center of something that felt like it never ended? My fingers hovered over the letter for a long time. Meera's handwriting looked almost like a ghost trying to be remembered. She always looped her Y's like a treble clef, a detail I once found charming, then manipulative, then just sad. The flip phone buzzed again, but I ignored it this time. I needed to see what she wrote. Maybe part of me believed she was finally going to explain why she blew our life apart. Maybe part of me wanted her to admit it was never love in the first place. But what I got was something much worse. The letter wasn't an apology. It wasn't even addressed to me. It started with a name I hadn't seen in over a decade, Alden. Alden was Meera's ex before me, a guy she swore was ancient history, someone she hadn't spoken to since college. But here she was, writing to him in a tone so intimate, it made me feel like I was eavesdropping on something I was never supposed to read. She talked about the money finally being in play, about how Wallace has no idea, and something about a transfer being completed once the asset is secure. The asset. I sat there in the metal chair, surrounded by silence, letting those words coil around my brain. The letter read like a plan, a setup, and I was in the center of it, blind and stupid, like I always feared. And then I flipped the photo over. It was Travis, all right. My brother. He was smiling in the picture, wearing a jacket I didn't recognize, but something about the background caught my eye. Behind him, barely visible through the burned edges, was a wall. The paint was a familiar dull green. And in the lower corner, just barely peeking out, was another box. Larger, thicker, different design, but unmistakably connected. On the back of the photo, in black marker, someone had written, "There was never one." That's when I realized the box I'd buried wasn't the only one. It wasn't even the original. Mine was the decoy. I suddenly understood the text. You opened the wrong wall. The real one, the one they wanted, was still hidden, still untouched. And Travis had found it. Or tried to, because he was missing now. I looked back into the box. The red USB seemed to glow beneath the overhead light. I took it in my hand, weighing the decision like it could alter time. The warning still echoed in my head. Don't plug in unless you're alone. I was alone now. At least, I thought I was, until I heard something behind the thin metal wall of the unit. It sounded like breathing. Low, steady, human. I held my breath. Listened harder. Another sound. A soft scrape. Then a creak. Not from my unit, but the one directly adjacent to mine. I stood slowly, USB still in hand, heart thumping against my ribs. The wall between us was no thicker than sheet metal and silence. I didn't move. Neither did they. But something about the energy shifted, as if they knew I knew. The flip phone buzzed again, loud in the stillness. I grabbed it and looked down. Unknown, stop digging. Then, 1 second later, unknown, they're listening. That was enough. I grabbed the box, closed it tight, and bolted. I didn't even bother locking the unit. By the time I reached my car, I was soaked in sweat and convinced I was being watched from every direction. I didn't care. I had what they were trying to recover. Or at least, what they thought I had. I didn't drive home. I drove an hour north to a diner off Route 19 and paid a trucker $20 to let me sit in the passenger seat of his rig while I plugged the USB into my work laptop. I needed to know what was inside. If this was what Meera and Alden were really after, I couldn't be caught with it in my house. The folder loaded instantly. No encryption. No passwords. Just a video file titled Journal_553. MOV. The numbers again, the same ones from the sticker on the box. I pressed play, and what I saw in the first 30 seconds turned everything I believed about Meera, about Travis, about myself, into ash. Because the person in the video wasn't me. But he looked exactly like me. The man on the screen sat in a narrow, dimly lit room with no windows and concrete walls. He was wearing my favorite hoodie, the one I thought I lost in a laundromat 4 years ago. His hair was slightly shorter than mine, his build almost identical, and he even had the same scar above his left eyebrow from when I fell off my bike in 7th grade. But it wasn't me. I don't mean in the poetic sense, like I'd changed or become someone else. I mean literally. That man wasn't me. But he wore my face like a suit he'd been born into. He leaned forward on the screen. If you're watching this, it means I'm dead. Or close enough to it. I paused the video. My hands were slick with sweat, my mouth dry, my stomach aching with a nausea I hadn't felt since Meera left. I looked over at the trucker, asleep, snoring quietly with a half-eaten corn dog in his lap. The entire cabin smelled like gasoline and grape soda, but I couldn't focus on anything except the still frame on my screen. I hit play again. The man continued, "My name is irrelevant now. What matters is this. I was placed in your life to keep things balanced. I was your redundancy, your backup, your mirror. But I broke protocol the moment I fell for her. Meera." I felt something behind my eyes crack. He smiled then, and it was my smile. Awkward. Too toothy. Slightly tilted to the right. The smile I had seen in photos from high school yearbooks and bad wedding pictures. But this version of me didn't feel real. His tone was too calm, too practiced, like he was reciting someone else's tragedy. "I didn't plan to take your life," he said. "I only wanted to observe. But the problem is, once you're inside someone's world long enough, you start thinking you belong there." He paused, looking down at something off-screen. Then he whispered, "I loved her. And she loved me. Not the version of you she married. The version she wanted you to be." I flinched. He kept talking. "She was the first one who saw through the program. She figured it out faster than the others. That's why she had to be part of it. But then Travis, he started asking questions. Snooping. The wrong people noticed." He looked straight at the camera. "That's why I buried the real box. Not the one you found. The actual one. Behind the panel in the basement of the Ridgetop house. Where your uncle died. You remember that place, right? You were 7. I nearly dropped the laptop. The ridgetop house had been abandoned for years. My Uncle Harold was found dead there when I was a kid, brain aneurysm, they said. But I hadn't thought about that house in decades. I never told Meera about it. I never told anyone, not even Travis. So how did this man, this duplicate, know? The screen began glitching then, as if the file was corrupted. I fast-forwarded through several seconds of static before the image stabilized again. The copy, my doppelganger, looked visibly shaken now. The lighting had changed. He was sweating. The walls behind him had strange symbols painted in red chalk. His eyes darted around, like he was hearing something I couldn't. If they find this recording, he said quickly, they'll come for you next. You're not protected anymore. You were only safe as long as I was active. But now, you're exposed. And Meera tried to warn you. But she waited too long. There was a loud bang off-screen. He flinched. The camera tilted. For a split second, a shadow moved across the wall behind him. Then the screen cut to black. That was it. End of file. I sat frozen in the passenger seat of a stranger's truck, staring at the reflection of my own terrified face in a black laptop screen, trying to understand what the hell just happened. Was it a prank? Some elaborate psychological game? Deepfake? AI? But the voice, the details, the scar above the eye, none of it could be faked. Not like that. Not with that precision. Not with that tone. If Meera had helped make this happen, then I'd never known her at all. And if Travis had disappeared after chasing this thread, then he may have gotten closer to the truth than I ever did. The ridgetop house. I hadn't been there since the funeral. But I remembered one thing clearly. Uncle Harold's basement had no panels. It was just stone walls and a dirt floor. Unless something changed. Or unless I remembered it wrong. Or unless the house wasn't ever really his to begin with. Either way, I knew where I had to go next. But first, I had to find Meera. Because if that man on the screen had been telling the truth, then she hadn't betrayed me after all. She'd been protecting me. And now she was in more danger than ever. I drove to the ridgetop house in silence. No music. No podcasts. Just the sound of tires chewing up cracked asphalt as the sky slowly bled from gray to black. I hadn't been on that road in over 20 years, but my hands knew where to go. Every curve, every broken street lamp, every overgrown mile looked the same. As if the town itself had been preserved in formaldehyde just for my return. I remember vomiting in the passenger seat of my dad's car when they drove me away from that house the day after Harold's body was found. I remember seeing the basement door open behind the coroner as they rolled the gurney out, even though everyone said it had been sealed shut. I remember being told it was just grief making me see things. Now I was back, and I was alone. The house was still standing, though barely. The roof had partially collapsed over the east wing, and ivy had taken over what used to be the front porch. A "No trespassing" sign had been nailed to the door, faded, warped, the corners curling like burned paper. I parked around back and got in through the old coal chute we used as kids to dare each other into the cellar. The air inside was thick, earthy, and wrong. Like wet cardboard and iron. I didn't turn on a flashlight right away. I let my eyes adjust, because part of me didn't want to see everything at once. Some places deserve to stay half-remembered, like dreams you wake up sweating from but can't fully explain. As I walked through the hallway, I noticed something odd. The pictures on the walls were still hanging. Family photos. My mom, young. Me and Travis in matching red sweaters. But the glass had been shattered, not cracked from age, but deliberately punched through. All the faces had been gouged out with something sharp. Every single photo. Every single face. Gone. When I reached the kitchen, I stopped. There was a single plate sitting on the counter. Clean. Recently used. A single spoon beside it. And a coffee mug half filled with what looked and smelled like fresh black coffee. Someone had been here. Or worse, someone never left. The basement door was exactly where I remembered it. Except it was open. Wide open. The stairs creaked like bones as I descended, flashlight finally in hand now. The basement had always terrified me. It wasn't just the darkness, it was the stillness. Like time moved slower down there, or maybe didn't move at all. The walls were damp and lined with exposed stone. But as I scanned the room, my heart caught in my throat. Because there, on the far side, behind the boiler, was something that had never been there before. A wooden panel. Newer wood. Lighter. Less weathered. Out of place. I approached it slowly. Pressed my hand to it. It was warm. I looked closer and saw that the seams were held in place by metal brackets. No screws. No hinges. Just pressure fit into the stone wall. I wedged my crowbar into the corner and pulled hard. The panel popped off with a long, low creak like it was exhaling. Behind it, another room, or what looked like one. But it didn't make sense. This house wasn't supposed to have a sub-basement. There'd never been mention of it on the plans. But there it was. A narrow corridor, lined with rust-colored walls and a grated floor. I stepped inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, I felt my ears pop. The air was thicker, warmer, and filled with a strange, electrical buzz, like I was inside an old computer. The corridor bent sharply to the left, and at the end of it was a metal door. On the door, someone had etched a symbol in black paint. A circle, split down the center, with two opposing arrows wrapping around it. I'd seen that symbol before, on the red USB stick, faintly engraved near the base. But now it was painted with purpose, thick and deliberate. I reached for the handle. It turned with ease. Inside was a room that looked like it belonged in a bunker. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, computer towers, and recording equipment. Real stuff. Industrial. Analog. Not digital. A reel-to-reel tape was still spinning, playing nothing. In the center of the room, on a workbench, was a file folder with my name typed on the label. Wallace Hargrove, primary candidate #002-13A. I opened it. Inside, photos of me, surveillance logs, copies of emails I had sent from accounts I no longer remembered, and, worst of all, transcripts of conversations I'd had with Meera, word for word, including things we whispered in bed, things I never told anyone, things even she probably forgot. Someone had been listening to us for years, and then I found the final page in the folder. It was a termination order, dated 4 days after Meera left, signed by someone named Alden Pike. Status: Meera decommissioned. Source: compromised. Primary to be observed until withdrawal or reactivation protocol. I dropped the folder. Mirror. They weren't referring to a metaphor. They meant him, the man from the video. The one who looked like me. The one who loved her. The one who warned me. Too late. I should have left then. I should have run. But as I turned to exit, I saw something else. A photograph pinned to the back wall. Larger. Laminated. A recent image of Meera, standing outside a motel, talking to someone in a hoodie. Her face was circled in red ink. Underneath it, scrawled in all caps. Retrieve the asset. Erase her. I left the Ridgetop house just after midnight. I didn't take the file. I didn't take the real tapes or the map pinned under the drawer labeled Phase 2. I only took the photo of Meera with the red circle around her face and a battered flash drive I found taped under the desk. I didn't know what was on it, but something told me it wasn't meant to be left behind. It felt warm to the touch. I threw it in the glove compartment and didn't look back. Driving home, I kept expecting headlights to appear in the rearview mirror. A black SUV, maybe two, with no plates and windows too dark to be legal. But the road behind me stayed empty. Still, my grip on the steering wheel was white-knuckled the whole way. By the time I got back to my house, the clocks in the living room had stopped ticking. Every single one. All 12. Frozen at 3:09 a.m. I didn't even make it upstairs. I sat down on the floor, laptop open, photo of Meera on the coffee table, and stared at the flash drive like it was a weapon I didn't know how to use. The thought that kept clawing through my skull was this. If Meera had been marked for erasure, how much time did she have left? And if they knew I had seen the file, found the basement, touched their secrets, then how much time did I have? I must have fallen asleep because the sound that woke me wasn't my own thoughts but a soft, rhythmic tapping on the front window. Not the door. The window. Like someone didn't want to be heard, just noticed. I checked the time. 3:09 a.m. Every single clock, every digital display, my phone, the oven, even the cable box, all of them showed the exact same time. Frozen. Unmoving. As if the entire world had paused itself for this moment. The tapping continued. I grabbed the flashlight from under the couch and crept toward the window, careful not to disturb the silence that was now heavy as stone. When I finally peeked through the blinds, I didn't see anyone. Nothing but darkness, fog, and the reflection of my own hollowed face. And then my phone lit up. New message. No number. Just one word. Now. Before I could react, the power cut out. The house went completely dark, and the air turned strange, like it had been siphoned from the room. The flashlight flickered. I heard the back door click open, even though I knew I'd locked it. Every hair on my arm stood on end. I grabbed the box from earlier, the original one, the one that had followed me through this nightmare, and bolted down the hallway. I didn't have a weapon. I didn't have a plan. I just knew staying was suicide. I slipped out through the bathroom window and dropped down into the hedges, skinning my elbow on the way down. I didn't look back. I didn't want to know who, or what, was inside my house. I made it 2 blocks before I saw her. Meera, standing under a flickering streetlight, soaked from the rain I hadn't even realized had started, eyes wide, clutching a duffel bag like it was the last thing tethering her to this world. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, like she'd been running longer than I had. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me like I was a ghost. Or maybe she was trying to confirm that I wasn't the other version of me, the one she used to love, the one who vanished. You saw it, she finally whispered. Her voice cracked, fragile. I nodded. Everything. The file. The video. The orders. She swallowed hard. Her hand trembled on the duffel. Then you know we have to leave. Now. Leave where? She looked over her shoulder. Then back at me. They'll come for both of us. They won't stop this time. You broke the clock, Wallace. You weren't supposed to look behind the wall. I stared at her, heart pounding in my throat. What is behind the wall, Meera? What the hell is all of this? She hesitated, just for a second, then unzipped the duffel. Inside, the second box. The real one. Larger. Scratched. Wrapped in chains. On top of it sat a plastic ID badge, burned around the edges. It had my face on it. But the name wasn't mine. The name said Alden Pike. I stepped back like I'd been punched in the stomach. What is this? I asked. You're not who you think you are, she said softly. You never were. And then the lights on the street went out. One by one. The street fell into darkness like a curtain dropping at the end of a play. All that remained was the soft glow of Meera's eyes in the fading light, and the quiet tremble of the wind slipping through broken gutters. I stood there frozen, holding a box that might have been the key to everything, or nothing at all, while the woman who once shattered me whispered that I wasn't me. You're not Wallace, she repeated. You're not Alden either. You're what they built between us, a failsafe, a placeholder. But somehow you woke up. I wanted to laugh, scream, run, but I did none of that. Because in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt. I didn't know who I was, but I knew what I wasn't. I wasn't afraid anymore. Then let them come, I said, gripping the box tighter. But they don't get to decide what happens next. I do. Meera's face softened. For the first time since that first strange call, she smiled. Not the seductive smile she wore during our marriage. This one was real. Sad, small, but real. We didn't run. Not that night. Instead, we walked. Down the block. Past the house that used to be mine. Past the parked black sedan with its engine cooling quietly in the dark. Past everything that had tried to erase us. We drove until the signal dropped and the roads narrowed to dirt. Then we found a cabin, an old ranger's station, abandoned and half-collapsing. And that's where we stayed. For 2 days, we talked. Meera told me everything. About Alden, about the trial program, about the Meera project, and how it was meant to replace broken people with cleaner versions. Versions without guilt, without regret. I had been one of the prototypes. But something went wrong. I remembered the pain. I remembered her. I became more than the machine they built. I became me. They wanted perfect people, she said, tracing her fingers along the edge of the box. But you were real. That's what scared them. We burned the files. Smashed the drives. Cracked the box open and found only a stack of analog tapes labeled emotional residue, Wallace. We never listened to them. Some doors don't need reopening. And then one morning, we left it all behind. We moved upstate. Small town. No clocks. Just trees and a lake that freezes over in the winter. I run a bookstore now. Meera teaches art therapy to kids. We don't talk about what happened. Not because we're hiding, but because we've earned the silence. Sometimes I still wonder what I really am. A copy? A ghost? A glitch that chose to stay? But every time she looks at me, not the version of me she once knew, not the version she lost, but this version, the one who stayed, the one who chose her even after everything. I stop wondering. Because the truth is, I may have been made by someone else. But the man I became, that was all me. And that's enough.